The Rainbow Caverns Mine Train opened in Disneyland in 1956 as one of the theme park's first major additions. It was among the park's most popular attractions, and amidst the various offerings in Frontierland, the Rainbow Caverns Mine Train was certainly its signature experience. Frontierland was dedicated to the past, a tribute to the bygone pioneers, the fearless trailblazers who risked danger and uncertainty to forge new paths in pursuit of the American dream. Walt was in love with this concept and surely could identify himself in specific aspects of that generation's journey. His park, and Frontierland particularly, would tell their story. Walt paid tribute to the frontier era by incorporating as many of the various means of transportation that the Old West could offer. There were Conestoga wagons and stagecoaches and mule packs and riverboats and more, all funneling through the living mining town of Rainbow Ridge. Rainbow Ridge was a prospective community establishment in the middle of the arid desert wilderness where exploring settlers on the hunt for gold prudently set up shop. The bustling municipality of Rainbow Ridge had all the simple amenities a town should have: general stores, a hardware shop, and even a hotel. Though it was just a quaint mining community, it was still prone to the excitement of the Old West, as bandits engaging in shootouts would occur occasionally. One of the defining features of Rainbow Ridge was that it was a stop along the storied route of the RMRR, the Rainbow Mountain Mining and Exploration Company. These trains were smaller scale and heavily inspired by and modeled closely after a typical 1900 steam engine train. Some of the more detailed features included the antique headlamp that would light the way in front, and the truly burning smokestack creating white-hot aerial breadcrumbs on its rolling journey west. A normal trip on the mine train would take you through the varying vistas of the desert over a trip of about 7 minutes. The Rainbow Desert was your first stop with unique and natural features like Elephant Rock or Inscription Rock. You could also witness here a plethora of cacti who, after wandering the desert, after the heat and dehydration and hallucinations kick in, you might start to see them become personified. You'd find the boiling devil paint pots bubbling and popping with different hues, and of course, you'd bravely roll the dice as you chugged along underneath the balancing rocks. Along the way, you'd see all the other happenings going on within the desert or along the rivers of America. Even before 1960, there was already tremendous life in this desert. The highlight of the tour would happen within the pitch darkness of a mine, where the fluorescent waters of the aptly named Rainbow Cavern would be on full display. Inside, the cavern served venue to a variety of different colored falls and water features. After the vision of the guests would slowly adjust to the dark cave light, the vivid rainbow caverns were surely a sight to behold. Imagineer Claude Coates had a large part in this attraction, and particularly the magic taking place within this cavern scene. Claude Coates was overseeing several projects that were utilizing the semi-new technology of ultraviolet blacklight. These methods are most prominently on display in Fantasyland. Blacklight made the characters and sets within these very dark rides pop brightly and brilliantly. Could he utilize this in the caverns? Through the uses of dye and strategically placed lighting, the Rainbow Caverns were able to come alive. The epic finale would have been Rainbow Falls, a rushing waterfall that vibrantly poured every single color of the rainbow. This created interesting issues, as the dyes would eventually mix upon the impact of splashing the bottom. It just couldn't be sustained as a long-lasting effect. Around the studio at the time of Disneyland's creation, they were designing the park, but they were also producing the programming for Disneyland's television show. This included episodes dedicated to Tomorrowland and the exploration of outer space. These episodes featured significant men of math and science like Heinz Haber and Werner von Braun. Seeing these brilliant minds within the studio, Claude Coates questioned them about the best possible way to achieve this desired effect within the Rainbow Cavern. After quick yet careful scrutiny, they informed Coates of their disappointing verdict. It just couldn't be done. When Claude Coates relayed this information to Walt, he simply looked up at Claude and said, "Well, it's fun to do the impossible." He then stood up with a smirk and thoughtfully patted the back of his chair and left. And he was right. In 1956, the Rainbow Caverns were open to the mine train, and with it, the famous Staircase Falls, the Paint Pot Falls, and Geyser Grotto, and of course, the visually impressive and the meticulously figured out Rainbow Falls. It was Disneyland's first D-ticket ride, which in a pre-e-ticket world meant it was the best of the best. Walt was always a fan of plussing his park. Plussing is a Walt coin term meaning the act of adding an improvement to an experience, making it bigger and better in some way, and ultimately increasing guest delight and satisfaction. Sometimes this looked like adding real-life mermaids to the submarine voyage, or adding Tinkerbell and fireworks to a blank evening Disneyland sky, and in the case of the Mine Train, it meant adding a tour through nature's wonderland.
Well, if I had it to do over again, I think, no, I don't think it would. I don't know. I hope I don't have to do it over again.
The year is 1960 and a new decade was upon the world. Folks in America are paging through a childish account of Atticus Finch in the 1930s South in Harper Lee's breakthrough novel, To Kill a Mockingbird. And everyone is Spartacus as Stanley Kubrick's historical epic becomes the highest-grossing film ever for Universal Studios at the time. And professional arguing becomes a broadcast event in the first ever televised presidential debate between Richard Nixon and eventual victor John F. Kennedy. And by this time, Disneyland was regularly seeing yearly attendance of nearly 5 million people. Perhaps this was due to the fact of constantly growing, changing, and expanding exhibits and lands. There was always something being added. For instance, 1960 saw the premiere of America the Beautiful in Tomorrowland. On opening day, Walt Disney opened his park with a unique Circle Vision experience called Circarama Presents A Tour of the West. Rather than a traditional cinematic experience, Circarama stretched the screen across and around the entire theater, giving you a different yet realistic feeling effect no matter what perspective you were watching from. This was achieved by using a special rig that featured 11 cameras pointing each in a different direction that, when eventually displayed upon the 11 screens in the Circle Vision Theater, created an impressive theatrical experience that truly put guests in the middle of the action. Tour of the West featured a series of random 360-degree viewpoints of Western America, including scenic views of Beverly Hills and the Monument Valley. America the Beautiful would take this concept and expand it. The 16-minute experience featured the same techniques and principles, though now you were treated to more stunning views and more places from all over America. These shots were taken from more creative vantage points as well, like the ground and even the sky. You'd explore iconic places of traffic and industry like Times Square in New York City, the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, or even the booming automobile factories in Detroit, Michigan. You'd likewise visit the amazing natural landmarks that the country had to offer, places like the Grand Canyon and the changing colors of an autumn in Vermont, and the vast open plains of Oklahoma. America the Beautiful did not require a ticket to view and was always a popular stop for guests in the park. 1960 also saw the arrival of the Snow White Wishing Well and Grotto. The well was sponsored by the Variety Club of America, and each wish that was wished would eventually go on to support various children's charities around the world. Walt loved the idea. The grotto was decorated by special marble figures carved by Italian sculptor Leonida Parma. When the sculptures were delivered, they were all the same size, including Snow White herself. Imagineers fixed this by placing the premier princess farther away atop the falls, and through forced perspective, she's able to stand above and seemingly larger than her 7 smaller counterparts. In 1948, Walt Disney started a new venture in filmmaking. In an attempt to really open up the world of nature and the planet to his audiences, he began producing short, nature documentary features that he called his true life adventure films. The first installment was called Seal Island, and it showcased the huge population of seals living off the coast of Alaska in a series of small islands within the Bering Sea. It would go on to win an Academy Award that year for Best Short Film. These films really caught on with audiences who had never really seen anything like this before. They were clamoring to see more wildlife and unfamiliar experiences in this way. These nature documentaries brought the wonder of the world into theaters for people who might not be able to go and see for themselves. Walt figured that Disneyland could serve as another venue to bring these exotic places to his audiences. Adventureland itself was originally conceived as True Life Adventureland, and its main purpose was to recreate the settings and places found in those films in a new and unmistakable physical environment. We can observe so many of these elements in Adventureland, as it was going to serve as the main arena where guests would explore these remote and alien environments of this nature within the park. But as Walt continued to produce these projects, many of the most successful True Life adventures were appearing more appropriate for the setting of Frontierland. So with the initial push of these fitting true life adventures, an update to Frontierland was in order, and particularly the Rainbow Caverns Mine Train. As its attraction poster would suggest, the newly named mine train through nature's Wonderland would feature callbacks and deliberate visits to the locations featured in these notable true life adventures. Specifically, In Beaver Valley, a short film covering the life and domain of a beaver. It too won Best Short Film in 1951. The Olympic Elk, a short film documenting the majestic elk traversing the forests of Washington state. And Bear Country, a short film covering a set of bears living in Yellowstone National Park. It too won Best Short Film in 1954. And The Vanishing Prairie and the Living Desert, two full-length feature films, one capturing the wonder apparent on America's disappearing grasslands, and the other showcasing the active vibrance on display in the desert. They both went on to win Best Documentary in 1954 and 1955. So with these true life adventure films in mind, the town of Rainbow Ridge was expanded, firstly as a new dance hall and opera house, and other facades were added to the hillside. The whistle stop was becoming alive in a different sense as well. Within these new buildings, the sounds and conversations of the citizens inside could easily be eavesdropped from without. Rainbow Ridge was becoming a living and moving community. The ride itself would see a great amount of change as well, with the incorporation of these new true life influences taking effect. The living desert was downsized a bit as innovations allowed for a closer focus on creating more realistic looking environments, and it made way for new additions like Old Unfaithful Geyser, which shot streams of water over 70 feet in the air on an irregular basis. More improvements were also added to the grand finale of the Rainbow Caverns. More color, more lighting, and more decor within the stalactites and stalagmites of the colorful caverns. Most notably, above all these changes, was that the mine train became one of the first attractions to utilize the new and developing technology of animatronics. The addition of 200 animatronic animals were placed all around the entire mine train experience, and it's what truly made the mine train what it was. Some remained still and stationary, while others offered actual movement to coming alive. The environment was energetic and vibrant, just as it had been portrayed by the true life adventure documentaries. Disney also implemented a team to make the space as true to life as possible, with the addition of over 150 different kinds of specifically appropriate trees and desert foliage. The train would also pass by the brand new Cascade Peak, a 75-foot tall mountainscape with a cascading waterfall that was primarily made to disguise the new happenings and animatronics going on in Beaver Valley and Bear Country from guest boating on the Mark Twain or sailing ship Columbia on the rivers of America. Guests would pass by this new landmark and instantly become enamored as they were close enough to the falls to get lightly spritzed. Another important factor Walt was keen on incorporating more was humor. There were goofy gags here and there around the park, but there was perhaps a heavier focus on the wonder Disneyland could offer rather than the playful aspect that was so important for Walt. For instance,
well, that's the hallmark of the African elephant. Well, let's leave the happy couple and head for Schweitzer Falls, named in the honor of the famous Dr. Scientist. It's a little close.
it lacked the same appeal that the attraction we know today has. Walt wanted his guests in his park to laugh. For this task of infusing humor and wit into the park, he went to one of the more creative and funnier people that he knew, and that was Marc Davis, one of his trusted Imagineers and one of the original 9 Old Men. He would be credited for the design and animation of many classic Disney characters like Snow White, Brer Rabbit, Mr. Toad, Tinkerbell, and most recently at the time, Cruella de Vil. While he was a critical part of bringing life and character to the creations of the animation studio, Walt saw his talents being better served over at Imagineering. So as the final color was added to the last animation cells for 101 Dalmatians, Marc Davis relocated and began working primarily on Disneyland attractions. He would be fundamental in bringing a comical entertainment factor to many of the rides and experiences forthcoming, but his first task was to plan and conceptualize some gags and stories to tell with the mine train. Marc took a ride on the Rainbow Cavern mine trains and his creative juices immediately got flowing. He mocked up some concept drawings of ways to improve the attraction. This exchange was one of the main reasons the retooling became so important to Walt. Marc Davis knew animation and the nuances and details that went along with that. He was soon meeting with his fellow Imagineers, going throughout the park and throughout the mine train ride specifically, offering his comedic and animating input. And essentially, that's what animatronics are. It's simply another form of animation, and Marc felt right at home within the minds of Imagineering, transferring his unique personality with every concept he envisioned. You can see Marc's hilarious input in the mine train via humor scattered all along the ride. Plus, many scenes served as loose and direct callbacks to real events in the true life adventure films. In the narration, we can hear more of Davis's humor as voice actor Dallas McKinnon, who most notably brought Gumby to life, took over hosting duties as your prospected narrator with zingers and one-liners throughout.
Them wild pigs is caught up with old Mr. Bobcat. He's in kind of a sticky situation.
He would also lend his voice to an upcoming Frontierland attraction. Marc Davis would continue to bring some of the most amusing and enchanting characters to Disneyland in the following years. The mine train through nature's wonderland instantly became a staple of a day at Disneyland, and it was a special attraction that guests could ride over and over, again and again. Alright folks, we did it. We made it to the 1960s, the groovy era of pirates and tiki rooms and people movers and a whole lot more. So make sure you're sticking around at the Disneyland Chronicles. Subscribe, hit that thumb and bell, leave a comment. It lets us know you care. And that's all for now. Until next time, we'll see you in the happy place. Bye!